All right, hello. I want to welcome you all to our session on account provisioning and customization using Terraform with AWS Control Tower. So as you probably have heard at this point, this was a new product that was just announced yesterday. And so we're going to be talking through some of the benefits as well as give you kind of a demo to talk through what we can do with this product and how it kind of functions. So we'll start off with just a high-level overview. Talk through some of the components, the key elements of it, and then go through a little bit of the architecture. And from there, we'll move into some demos. Then we'll kind of move from that to some common questions, talk about our documentation and support process, and then kind of finish up with some of the launch partners that have already been working with AFT and talk through some of the things they've done. So to set the stage, the product officially is called AWS Control Tower Account Factory for Terraform. It really is a Terraform pipeline that you can use to provision and customize your accounts in AWS Control Tower. What this means is that all the benefits that you would already get with Control Tower, so this is all of the guardrails, all of the logging, the AWS best practices, those are all going to be included with this product because it's going to actually use AWS's Control Tower as well. But then what it's going to do on top of that is it's going to allow you to actually trigger the provisioning and customization of those accounts through a Terraform pipeline. And so we'll talk through what that pipeline looks like a little bit later. But it does give you basically the way to fully automate that solution so you can actually not have to do it through the Control Tower console and use Terraform natively to do some of these things. So on this, it will support all the flavors of Terraform. So you see Terraform Cloud, Terraform Enterprise, and Terraform Open Source are all supported with this solution. So if you're looking at the solution, probably the first thing to start with is our AFT pipeline. And so the pipeline really is a fully delivered pipeline that sets up all the components you'll need to run this process. It will handle everything from contacting and working through Service Catalog and Control Tower to get the account set up, as well as all the post-account creation customization steps. The next element of the AFT solution is the AFT feature options. And what this is, these are AWS-provided features, kind of some high-level ones that we've seen a lot of customers asking for. So these are ones that we put in just as a default that you can choose. There are feature flags, so you don't have to use any of them. You can use all of them, some of them. So they're up to you on how much you want to use and which ones are interested to you. If you do select them, then you can also still use your customizations as well. And that's the last component of it, which is the one that really gives you the ability to customize your accounts to exactly what you need from both a security perspective, as well as what your customers or your end users might need from their account usage perspective as well. So this can be anything from, actually let me just go ahead and start with the feature options first before I get into the customizations. But if you're looking at our feature options, now these are the ones that are feature flagged. And so if you're looking at the feature flags, what you're going to see is the first one is the ability to turn on CloudTrail data events. So Control Tower already turns on your CloudTrail management events, but this is an optional way if you wanted to actually enable the data events as well. The second option is automated enterprise support enrollment. With this feature, this actually triggers if you have an enterprise support account. You can actually trigger all new accounts to actually start through the process to actually get enrolled into that enterprise support agreement. So it kind of streamlines that process. So it's not an offline process as much as it is without this. And then the last one is probably the one that's most commonly requested, which is the ability to delete the default VPCs for all regions in an account. And so what this does is it gives you basically the clean slate to start to set up any additional functionality that you want for those accounts as you're going through them. And then the final one, which is where the real flexibility kicks in, is on our AFT customizations. These really are just custom Terraform modules. They can be ones that you've sourced or that you've written yourself. They will plug directly into the pipeline. Brad will actually talk through how that plays into how that works when you look at our architecture. But this is where you can do everything from adding additional guardrails that may not be already provided by Control Tower to adding additional firewalls, a number of other things, whatever it might be that you need for those accounts. This is the piece where you can actually do that. So what do you need to have if you actually want to deploy AFT? So with AFT, you will have to have AWS Control Tower deployed. This is a partner solution for that, so they don't work independently of each other. They are dependent upon each other. So you will have to have Control Tower deployed, and you will create an AFT management account. So you'll provision an account specifically for the purpose of AFT. It does require Terraform version 0.15.5 and above. And as mentioned, if you are using Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise, you will need to have those configured. We will actually need to provide AWS Service Catalog access to Account Factory, so you'll have to make sure that's set up. And then you'll need to deploy the Account Factory repositories and examples. With that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Brad to kind of talk through our architecture.
All right, thank you, Kirk.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. Brad Henkel, Control Service Specialist. Did a lot of the architecture, and for everybody that's been waiting for this for a while, this has been a long 2-year journey. I know it's been a while, so we're pretty happy to finally have this here. We'll walk through the architecture on this one, and we'll talk through it. As Kirk said, the key area on this one here is really Control Tower and Service Catalog by extension being at the center. So one of the key features is you don't have to, in this one, work with CloudFormation. Everything can still be in Terraform if you choose. You have some other options. If Terraform can't fulfill the option there, we have some areas where you can use Bash and Boto 3 and stuff as an extension as well, but we're primarily focused on Terraform for that. But we do have to work with, and we do rely on Control Tower to lay down the initial governance rules on it. So if you have a governance rule that can be applied through Control Tower, we're not really intending for this to replace that, but if you have custom guardrails that aren't supplied by Control Tower, this is where the solution becomes pretty valuable for you on this one. It is a GitOps driven model. So as standard as it comes out, we expect you to have a repo and we expect you to drive through that. So you have Terraform configuration files that you do for account requests, for instance. With that, you do a git push into your chosen repo. In this case, for the demo, we're going to show you how code commit is one of the options that you have. But we also do support any CodeStar connections as well. So CodeStar today, if you know, it supports GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, GitHub.com, it supports Bitbucket Cloud, and others will become available. If you're outside of one of those VCSs, so you're using something like GitLab is an obvious one, and there's also a few other ones out there, Azure DevOps or some other solution there, we will come out with a blog on how you can use those with the solution. Kind of is really just to give you a preview of that one. It's more of a mirroring type option. But out of the gate, these are the ones that we do support for here. And as CodeStar adds more VCSs, they'll become more native into the offering on that one. But we'll go back to code commit because this is what we're going to show you through the demo on this one here. And then what you do is you go ahead and do that account request. That account request does have the metadata in there that we need for actually vending an account. So if you think about if you've used Control Tower before, there's 5 fields that are required. We also allow you to extend it beyond that. So if you think about things like account tags, those can be available. Plus we have customizations that you can do in there as well. We go ahead and we use Terraform open source. When you push this up, then we use a code build job to actually push that into DynamoDB. So DynamoDB gives us some traceability, gives us an audit plane, but more importantly, we also can, with this offering, Control Tower right now is a single process entity, so you can only process one account request at a time. With this solution, we will do the queuing for you. So the offering will do queuing, so if you want to submit 5 account requests in 1 Terraform request, you can do that here and we'll just do the queuing for you. We can't accelerate it, we can't make it go faster than what the offering does in the background, but what we can do is you don't have to sit there and wait for one to finish and process it again. That works regardless if you submitted the 5 or if somebody even came into the console and submitted one, we'll still just queue it and wait for it to get processed on that. So DynamoDB gives us some robustness there. Plus we'll talk a little bit later on about how you can use that to your advantage for some of the customizations that you may have to do where you have certain metadata that's specific to your type of guardrails. From there, we push it into and we call Service Catalog. Service Catalog contains a product for account provisioning. This is where the standard comes in. We are calling that, we have a general rule in here, we use Terraform unless we can't do it. So we even call it through a Terraform call here in case you're peering behind the scenes and you want to see what's going on. And we call Service Catalog to actually vend that account. As noted before, we let Control Tower do what it needs to do in laying down the guardrails, vending the account. So anything that you turn on in Control Tower gets applied, and we have a vended account at that point. But generally speaking, that vended account doesn't have all of your guardrails, so that's when we start to take it back, and that's when we start to provide, like Kirk had mentioned around the customizations, that's where we provide the framework for you to add your customizations. You may want to do something specific for VPCs, you may have security IAM profiles that you need to do on that. So what we do here is we take it back, we look for an event lifecycle, a lifecycle event, excuse me, and we take it back and we're doing step functions initially here. This area is customizable. You can put in your own Lambda in here or something that you need to do. But one of the cases that we're doing in here is there's some pre-work if you're using Terraform Cloud, Terraform Enterprise, we work off the concept of workspaces. So if it's a brand new account, we have to go and set up a workspace for that account. So we're doing some of those things through this function right here. But we quickly get out of the step functions and we go into account customizations. And this is where the bulk of where you're gonna put your code and what we envision on this one. It is a code build job that gets kicked off. And from that code build job, it looks down and Albert will come up here and we'll do the demo and we'll talk about this further, but we look at things as global changes or what we call account changes. Account change is a little bit of a misnomer because you have the flexibility to collect your accounts together on how you want. So if you like to use something like an SDLC process and call them dev, production, if you want to call them by business unit, if you want to go to the granularity of doing customizations for every single account, you can do that in here. And we'll talk a little bit about that through the demo on how you do that. But we do customizations at 2 levels, just remember that. It's at the global level, which accounts to all accounts, and at the account level, which you determine what makes up your account level on that. By default, we use Terraform open source. We'll manage all the state and back end. We don't really manage it, but we use an S3 back end for that. We provision all that for you. We'll do it across region. We do all the best practices around that. But like Kirk had mentioned, we also do support in here Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise. If you're using one of those, we do make, if you're familiar with them, we do make an API call to them. So anything that you have running in there or anything that you have around, if you want to use the PMR for those, if you want to use Sentinel, all those things still come into play. All of the state file management, everything stays within those subsystems. So if you're using cloud or enterprise, they still work the way that they do, that you may be using them today. It's just that we package up all the code and call it as an API call and let it go and hand it over and let it run on that one here. All the code that gets run in there from Terraform then gets applied to that vended account. We'll get a little bit into the details for this one here, but some of the things that we do for cloud and enterprise is there's always a struggle. We've always had this sort of issue of how you deal with long-lived keys in there. And since we're doing all this through a pipeline, we get a little bit more control. So one of the things that we do if you're using cloud or enterprise is we do actually create temporary credentials, apply those to the workspace, and those are only active while you're actually for a short period of time. So one of the things about it is that has the goodness of using short-lived credentials, but on the flip side, if you really think through it, those credentials are only going to expire pretty soon. So one of the things about this is you do have to rerun the pipeline if you want to get those credentials again from there. So even though you could technically go rerun a job from Terraform Cloud and Enterprise, You really, on this case, because of credentials, you want to actually just rerun the pipeline. So if you did updates to your Terraform code, or you just wanted to reapply something, just rerun the pipeline on that case there. And then at the end, we get a vended account from here. So that's the high level from an account request overview. I think the key takeaways, it is pretty flexible in the sense that we allow customizations at the account request process side. We allow customizations at the step function side. We allow customizations or also at the account side, and you can do that both in global setting, or you can also do that in an account type setting. We'll go into the demo a little bit more about how you instantiate those customizations, but this gives you a pretty good high-level overview of it on this offering right there. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. So as Brad mentioned, we're getting ready to go into the fun part of the presentation, so you get to see the meat and potatoes of the product. So during this demo, what you're going to see, we're going to actually show you a deployment walkthrough. You'll get to see how the repository is set up. We'll actually show you what it looks like to do the account request. You'll also get to see the global customizations, as well as if you need to re-invoke some of those customizations. So as Brad mentioned, you can run those back through. We'll show you the customizations pipeline, and as we'll finish up showing you the account customizations. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Albert, who can give you the full demo on this.
Perfect. Thank you, Kirk. Swap on over to our demo here. So where we are at starting this demo is all the prerequisites have been met. So if we take a look at our single sign-on interface here, we have our Control Tower management account, obviously, with the core accounts, log archive and audit, as you would expect. We have gone ahead and provisioned the AFT, the Account Factory for Terraform management account, and we have leveraged the AFT solution to create 2 accounts, a development account and a sandbox account. So that's where we're at, and first thing I'm going to do is kind of show you how we got here. So how did we go and deploy the AFT solution? And essentially, deployment is done through a module. And the module is pretty simple. You see it here. This is the call to our GitHub repo. And there's some variables here that are required in order to make the deployment. So the required variables here are basically account IDs, namely the Control Tower management account ID, the log archive account ID, the audit account ID, as well as the AFT management account ID. On top of that, we tell AFT what the Control Tower home region is. And as Brad mentioned, we do have an open source kind of backend that we use internally, as well as if you as a customer are leveraging open source. And that backend is deployed in a redundant fashion. So we ask you to provide us a secondary region to deploy the S3 bucket for states, as well as a Dynamo table for locking. So these are the minimum variables. On top of that, obviously we have some flexibility in configuration. And most of the ones you're seeing here are basically our default values, but they are here to basically show you how you can go ahead and change this around if you needed to. So the first one we have here is a Terraform distribution. We default to open source out of the box, but if you would like, this is where you would change things around and make that TFC or TFE, depending what flavor you are using. And if you were to do that, you would also add some variables that define the org name and things like that. As far as VCS providers go, we default to code commit. But as Brad mentioned, we do things through CodeStar connections. So if you wanted to use something like GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, or Bitbucket, this is where you would define that as well. Last but not least, we have our feature flags. As Kirk was mentioning, we have some features around deleting the default VPCs in provisioned accounts, enabling CloudTrail data events at the org level, as well as enabling enterprise support for vended accounts. And all these default to false out of the box, but if you wanted to go ahead and enable one of these or multiple of these, you would basically change that flag to true here as part of the deployment. And that's basically how deployment happened here. We ran an apply, and about 25 to 30 minutes later, you have an AFT environment. With AFT up and running, we can go into this AFT management account and take a look at some of the resources that we have. So we'll start by going to code commit, since that's what we're using for a VCS. And we're going to focus on 3 of these repositories. We're going to focus on account requests, global customizations, and account customizations. So as you saw in SSO, we have a couple of accounts that were provisioned through AFT, and we're going to go behind the scenes and take a look at how that provisioning occurred. So if I come back here to my editor, I basically have local copies of these repositories on my laptop, and we're going to drill into account requests. Notice that we do provide an example to get you started. In our particular environment, we have put in a couple of Terraform files inside of the Terraform folder. If we focus on the sandbox accounts first, we basically see the requests that created the sandbox account you saw in SSO. So first off, we have our control tower parameters. Behind the scenes, we're still using the account factory control tower provides, same service catalog product, hence, we are providing the same input set you are probably used to by now. Things like the root account email, the account name, the OU, where you would like that account to live, as well as details for the SSO user. Above and beyond that, we're allowing you to specify some account tags. And these tags are going to populate on the AWS organization side, and you will see them in your control tower management account. We also allow for some change management parameters. So anytime somebody creates an account or makes an update to one of these, they can basically specify who they are, why they're doing it, and that becomes part of the metadata that we store in DynamoDB. Last but not least, on the sandbox account example, we have custom fields, which is essentially any kind of key value pairs that you as a customer would like to specify and record in Dynamo for this account. And you can go ahead and use those in many ways later on. So if we take a look at this sandbox account, we want to go ahead and find it in orgs. So if I come over to my control tower management, we log into the management console. And we go to our control tower region and go into the organizations console. And here we have our OUs. We see the default control tower ones as well as the custom ones we've created. Since we're looking at Sandbox, here's our Sandbox account. And you can see that the tags that we specified are showing here. Now, one of the things we want to do is, let's say we want to update this tag and correct the owner on it, right? So that would be as simple as coming back to our account request here and changing this. So I'm going to change this to my email address. And we get to push that over to the Git repo, right? So this is the same folder we were looking at in the ID. I'm going to basically go into the account requests folder. If we do a status on this, you can see that we have modified that particular file. We're going to go ahead and add it. And we are going to do a commit, just updating the owner tag. And we are going to go ahead and do a git push up into that repository. What will happen at that point is a pipeline is going to trigger on the AFT management account. And it is a pipeline for AFT account requests. And this particular pipeline is the one that is responsible for making these changes. So this pipeline is going to take a couple of minutes to run, but we're going to go back and check in on the organizations console later in the demo to make sure that that tag actually updated. Going back to some of the repositories, we have the repository for global customizations, and we said we would talk about that next. So let's go over to our IDE, and let's take a look at the structure for that particular repository. So the first folder we see here is API helpers. And this is essentially where you would add your own, let's say, Boto 3 scripts, if you were using those, or any other Python scripts. Perhaps you have like an on-prem IP address management solution that you want to call for the API, and so on and so forth. And you would fill in your Python requirements here. The pipeline would take care of installing those requirements for you. You replace your Python files in that directory. And then you have these two shell scripts here. So on the pre-API helper side, whatever you put in this file is going to run prior to the Terraform. And using this file here, you can control the order in which you run your Python scripts. You can obviously pass some parameters over to those scripts. And you can do some other things as well. You can run some AWS CLI commands, or you can just do some bash scripting, and you can get creative. Similarly, as you would expect, we have the post-API helpers, which is exactly like the pre-API helpers, but it runs after the Terraform has been applied. So you have some flexibility there. Moving down to the next folder in this repo, we have our Terraform folder. And this is the portion where you get to add your own Terraform code. And you can add basically some resources, like I'm about to show you in this demo, or you can do calls to modules, whether they're on the registry, on GitHub, or on your own VCS. So in this particular case, this is a global customization. So whatever we put in this folder is going to apply to all accounts. And in this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to create an EC2 profile that gives SSM access to manage the instance. And the way you would do that is obviously you have to define a policy for SSM, which you see here. Then you would actually define the role, trusting EC2. And then you would add the instance profile, which is basically a wrapper around that role. So what we want to do is, just like we did earlier, we want to push these up to the repository. So this time we're going to go up a level, and we're going to go into global customizations. We'll clear the screen to make that a little neater. If we do a git status, we see that that file is currently on track, not committed, so we're going to go ahead and add it. We're going to do a commit, and we'll say adding EC2 SSM role. And we will do a git push. So if we go back to pipelines, we refresh here. You can see that account request executed a minute ago. It's complete. But global customizations did not execute anything. And that is by design. So what happens at this point in time is if you do absolutely nothing else, any new account that you provision from this point forward is going to have that IAM SSM role created. But what about previous accounts, right? So we had that sandbox account. What if we wanted to go ahead and tell AFT to go back and apply that global customization to that account? Well, for that, we leverage a step function and an event that you can pass in to do so. So let's take a look at that event and the structure for it. And I will collapse these so we can kind of walk through it. Now, this event can be passed in directly for step functions, which is what we're going to do in the demo. But obviously, you can pass this on through CloudWatch events or for any custom automation you'd like to put together. So first off, we tell AFT what accounts we want to include in this recustomization process. Because chances are that you just don't want to recustomize one. Perhaps you want to recustomize a particular group. So your first option is to say, hey, let's recustomize all accounts. But more than likely, you may be targeting a particular OU. You may be targeting accounts with specific tags. Or you may be targeting specific account IDs. And you can use a combination of these to basically identify the ones that you want to recustomize. Similarly, you can exclude using these same categories. You can exclude based on OU, tags, and accounts. And used together, it's pretty powerful. You can do things like, hey, let's do all accounts, but let's exclude the proto-U. Or perhaps you may want to include the proto-U, but exclude any accounts that have a tag of account type equals network. So used together, they can basically create a list of account IDs that the step function will then go ahead and re-invoke customizations for. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that process looks like. I'm going to copy this sample event here, and I'm going to go into the step functions console. And we have a step function called invoke customizations. And if we come in here, we can say start execution. And it's a little small, so I'll zoom in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the exclude section, because I'm not going to be excluding anything. And what I really want to do is target the sandbox OU. So I don't care about specific account IDs, specific tags, and obviously I don't want to do all. So I'm going to say, hey, let's go ahead and target the sandbox OU. We're going to get rid of that secondary entry there. And we're going to start execution. And we'll let this run, but it goes through a process of identifying targets. So basically, let me take a look at that criteria that you specified in the event, and let me figure out what account IDs match. Then we go ahead and invoke some other provisioning frameworks, basically other step functions that do some AFT management stuff in that account. And then we go ahead and execute the pipeline for that particular account. And we do so in a throttled way, right? So if you have an AFT ecosystem that has 100 provisioned accounts, and you go into that event and you say, hey, let's recustomize all accounts, we don't do all those at the same time. We do 5 by default out of the box, and we kind of cycle through them 5 at a time. So now that this is running, if I come back to my code pipeline view, I can see that this pipeline is in process, which is account ending in 8812, which matches my sandbox account. So while we're in this view, let's take a look at what one of these pipelines looks like. So the first thing we do is we source some code. And we're primarily sourcing the global customizations as well as the account customizations from whatever VCS you specified at deployment. Then we're running the global customizations. And as you can see, it's a 3-step process. We run those pre-API helpers in that shell script. We apply to Terraform. And then we do the post-API helpers. The last piece, which we haven't talked about yet, is the account customizations. And as you can see, it's structured in a very similar way. You have pre-API helpers, Terraform, and post-API helpers. But it has one big difference, which is it does not apply to every single account like the global customizations do. They can apply to one account or a group of accounts, depending on how you group these together. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we would do an account customization. So if I go back to my IDE and I take a look at account customizations, we see that we provide you with an account template that you can leverage. And in this case, what I've done is I've copied and pasted that folder, and I have renamed this copy Development Customizations. So what does that name mean? Well, if we take a look at my account request for development, we have all the fields we saw earlier, right? Our control tower parameters, our tags, our change manager parameters. But now we have one extra variable, which is account customizations name. And this name, development-customizations, matches this folder over on our account request, account customizations repo. That means that development account is going to get this particular customization. And within this folder, it should look very familiar because it's just like global customizations. You have your API helpers with the same structure as you would expect, and you have your Terraform folder just as we had over on our global customizations. On this particular development account, we want to do something a little different. In this case, we want to do an S3 account public access block. And we have an s3.tf file here. Again, we're calling a resource, but this is your code to modify. You can call a module or whatnot. And all we have to do at this point is check in this code. So I will go back to my terminal window here. In this case, I want to go to account customizations. Doing a git status shows that this particular folder has not been added, so I'm going to do a git add. I'll do a git commit, and I will say adding S3 public access block. And finally, we will do a push back up to code commit. As you would expect from having seen the global customizations run earlier, this also does not trigger a pipeline. As you can see on the sandbox account, we have the new commit that we added earlier globally, but our account customizations is still as an initial commit. In order to apply those, we would have to go and recustomize using that event I showed you earlier. That being said, any new account that you create moving forward using that account customization name will get those customizations applied. So as we wrap up this demo, let's take a look at some of the changes we made earlier. So earlier we had this sandbox account that had an owner of JDoe. If we go ahead and we refresh this now, we see that the owner has been updated with the update we made in our account request Terraform. Furthermore, we had deployed an SSM role in the sandbox account. And at this point, the pipeline is still running, but we're done with global customizations. So if we were to go into that particular account, we'll be able to visit IAM. Head on over to roles. And if I search for SSM, here's my role with the same policy that we had specified in our Terraform. So with that kind of wraps up the demo. I will hand it back to Kirk. Thank you.
The things to note here, sorry. One thing on this is we have worked with HashiCorp on this one. So the module that we talked about, if you go to the registry for Terraform, it is available out there now. The other thing too is don't underestimate the power that you have with the metadata that you could put in. So we didn't really show a deep example of that, but we have seen and talked to some customers that what they're going to do is they're going to use some things like they will put or ask the customer or the end user that's requesting the account for things like t-shirt size on sitter ranges. So if you put that metadata in there, what you can do is you can pull it out later on. And one of the things that's powerful with the pre-APIs, we'd all love to do everything in Terraform, but sometimes you have a custom IPAM solution, doesn't have a Terraform provider. So one of the things that you can do is either through the pre-API calls or even through Terraform if you can do it, you could use that t-shirt size to go out and pull in an IP range in your pre-API. You can pass that sitter range into your Terraform VPC config, and then when you get into the post API, you can report back what VPC was vended and what is the IP range that was assigned to it. So you can say, hey, I'm asking for a range, and I'm coming back. And we see that as a pretty powerful thing. We can't anticipate all the guardrails and customizations that you're gonna do, so that's one way that we wanted to maybe make it sure that without manipulating the pipeline per se, you have the ability to influence how things happen later on. Now you have to build it, it's your responsibility, but we think it's a clean way to go and do those types of customizations. So.
Yeah, just to kind of continue that, I think Brad was talking about some of the key uses that how you can use this solution, but I also wanted to, I'm going to turn it, kind of put the questions back that we've seen come to Brad before. So these are some of the ones that we've had customers ask us as we went through our preview process, and so we'll just kind of go through here and let Brad kind of eloquate on some of these ones. So what is the impact of forking code with this solution, Brad?
So it's open source. You can choose to go and fork the code, but as you do that, if that's what you're going to use and go and customize the code, this is a living, breathing entity. We're always going to be making updates to it. So when you do fork it over, you do have your own instantiation of it. So if you do go down that path and you stick on that path, you're going to be responsible for if we do a break fix, if we do some kind of patching later on. So our preference is that, you work with us, you let us know when there's an issue, you can log issues within GitHub. We're happy to take care of those ones, but so we're not recommending on this one to fork the code unless you have some underlying reason for doing so.
What about if I have an air-gapped environment in my Terraform Enterprise? Can I use that?
Yep, good question. We know Terraform Enterprise, it's not an issue with Terraform Cloud because it is a SaaS offering. Terraform Enterprise does allow you to do air-gapped. Because this is running within your AWS environment, you do need connectivity and routability back to it. So if you completely air-gap Terraform Enterprise, we won't be able to make the API calls to it. So you'd have to find another way to get that. So we don't support pure air-gapped environments for Terraform Enterprise.
So I know you mentioned during the presentation when you're talking about the architecture that we could do other VCSs through CodeStar. What about GitLab?
Yeah, so for GitLab, we're like I mentioned earlier, we're coming out with a specific blog post on how to do that. You could apply GitLab to a lot of other VCSs, but one of the things that we see is that it's very easy to mirror these ones over. So you can work with your GitLab. You can deploy the offering as a code commit offering. We know that you're not going to use code commit as the primary VCS, but what you can do is mirror GitLab over to it. So anything that you push up to GitLab, your developers can still use it like they like. It'll go and mirror up to code commit and then kick off the process from there.
Great. Thanks, Brad.
Yep.
So with that in mind, obviously, I think one of the great things about this solution is that it is closely tied with the Control Tower service. We've tried to make that as clear as possible and make sure that you know exactly what you're doing. And in fact, the best way to find out information about AFT is actually to go to the Control Tower user guide. It's going to have all the information about what you need to set up, both from the Control Tower side, as well as what the information about what Albert just went through on how to configure AFT itself. So all the customization details will be included right in that same user guide, all in one place. We also use the same support teams. So if you have any questions, the team that would normally answer your questions from Premium Support on Control Tower will also be able to answer your questions on AFT. So very centralized, very combined. Really, the two solutions are meant to build on each other and to help provide a full solution for you. As we've been going through this process and we reached our developments, as we came to the end of the development process, we did run a preview with this product, and we had a number of launch partners that actually were very active in deploying the solution and testing on the solution, and also starting to do some customizations of their own for their customers for making sure that they could have solutions out there. So obviously, as Brad and Albert mentioned, you're very easy for you to go ahead and make your own customizations with this product. But if you did want to have some assistance or you wanted to look for other alternative solutions that may be out there, these are a number of launch partners that have already begun and deploying with AFT and developing solutions for it. So it's a great place to start too if this isn't something you wanted to start on your own right out of the gate as well. With that, I would say, as I mentioned, the best next steps at this point is to go ahead and to go start playing with this yourselves. Go ahead and you can go ahead and download it. The QR code there will take you right to the location that gives you the download instructions. So go to the user guide. It'll give you all the steps that Albert went through on how to go through that. Gets you right there to start, and you can start playing with this yourself. As I mentioned, it launched yesterday, so we're very excited to have this out there. It is out there for you to go start with as soon as right now. So hopefully you'll find that it does take care of a lot of the concerns you had about how you wanted to automate and get your accounts customized and provide the solution more quickly to your customers with less interactions, manual interactions on your part. With that, I'd like to say thank you. I appreciate your time today. For Brad, Albert, and I, we appreciate your time with looking at our solution, and hope you will enjoy it as much as we have developing it. So thank you very much. With that, Yes, thank you. So we aren't going to be specifically answering questions, but we're happy to talk afterwards. I know they have to get the room kind of set up for the next session, so happy to meet after if you have a couple questions you wanted to finish. And as mentioned, please go ahead and complete your surveys. Thank you.